Hey, cutie. Today I decided I'm going to read you the most classic of all the Christmas stories, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Now, that's actually a really long story, especially since in the 1800s, people like to write really long books with long sentences and way too many words. So, what I'm going to do instead is read you another set of advent calendars. So I have 24 books, one for each day of the month leading up to Christmas. And we're going to have some fun with it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. Number 1, Scrooge. On Christmas Eve, Ebenezer Scrooge sat busy in his dismal counting house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather. But Scrooge did not feel the low temperature, for he carried his own chill within him. No beggars nor children came near him. Even the blind men's dogs kept their distance. When they saw him coming, they would tug their masters into doorways. 2. Bah humbug. Oh, Scrooge was a cold, tight-fisted one. How he hated Christmas and all that went with it. As Scrooge sat counting his money, a young boy stooped at the keyhole to sing. God bless you, merry gentlemen, sang the boy. May nothing you dismay. Bah humbug, snarled Scrooge. His voice was so menacing that the young singer fled in terror. Book 3, The Nephew. Next came Scrooge's nephew, Fred, crying, Merry Christmas, Uncle. Every idiot who goes about with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled with his own pudding, said Scrooge indignantly. Don't be cross. Come dine with me tomorrow, coaxed Fred. Keep Christmas in your way, and let me keep it in mine, was Scrooge's gruff reply. 5. Bob Cratchit. The hour for closing the office arrived. Before he left, Scrooge spoke with his clerk, Bob Cratchit, who sat in a dismal cell beyond the main room. You'll want the day off tomorrow, I suppose, said Scrooge. If quite convenient, sir. It's not convenient to pay a whole day's wages for no work, said Scrooge. Be here all the earlier the day after Christmas, he added harshly. 6. Home. After Scrooge had taken his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and had read all the newspapers, he set off for home. Scrooge's chambers, which had once belonged to his dead business partner, Jacob Marley, were a gloomy set of rooms in a large, dreary old building. Except for Scrooge, not a soul now lived there. 7. A ghostly noise. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, had to grope with his hands as the fog and frost hung about the black old gateway of the house. On the door was a metal knocker, unremarkable except that it was large. As Scrooge put his key in the lock, he saw not a knocker, but the face of his old partner, Jacob Marley, dead now for 7 years. As Scrooge stared at this eerie phenomenon, it once again became a knocker. Though shaken, Scrooge walked into the house and up the stairs. He put on his dressing gown and sat down before the fire. Suddenly, he heard a clanking sound, as if a heavy chain were being dragged. With a boom, the cellar door flew open, and he heard the noise much louder on the floors below. Then it came up the stairs and straight toward his door. 8. Jacob Marley. Through the heavy door came a ghost, and into the room it passed. Who are you? Asked Scrooge. In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley. Humbug! I don't believe it. At this, the spirit raised a frightful cry and shook its chain. "It is required of every man," said the ghost, "that the spirit within him should walk among his fellow men. If that spirit does not go forth in life, it is condemned to do so after death," the ghost continued. "It is doomed to wander through the world and witness what it cannot share, but might have shared on earth and turn to happiness. I wear the chain I forged in life. I am here to warn you that you have yet a chance to escape my fate. You will be haunted by three spirits. Expect the first tomorrow, when the bell tolls 1. 9. Sleep. When Scrooge awoke, it was to the sound of a bell tolling 1. At once a light flashed, and the curtains of his bed parted to reveal an unearthly visitor. "I am the ghost of Christmas past. Rise and walk with me." The ghost touched Scrooge, and he was lifted into the air. They passed through the wall and stood upon an open country road. 10. Christmas Past. "Good heaven!" cried Scrooge. "I was a boy here." They walked along the road, Scrooge recognizing every gate, post, and tree, until they came to a boarding school. "A solitary and neglected boy is left there still," said the ghost. Scrooge, upon entering, was amazed to see that the boy was himself as a child. Suddenly the door opened, and a girl ran to the boy. "I've come to bring you home, dear brother. Father's so much kinder than he used to be." "Your sister had a large heart," said the ghost. "She died giving birth to a son, whom you promised to look after, your nephew Fred." Scrooge seemed uneasy in his mind. "Yes," he answered briefly. After leaving the school, they passed through the busy thoroughfares of a city. There, too, it was Christmas time. 11. Old Fezziwig. The ghost stopped at a warehouse, and they went inside. An old gentleman in a wig sat behind a desk. "Why, it's old Fezziwig, my first employer!" cried Scrooge. Scrooge's former self, now a young man, came briskly in. Old Fezziwig laid down his pen. "Yo ho there, Ebenezer! No more work tonight. Clear away the desks and the cabinets." 12. Making merry. In came a fiddler with a music book. In came Mrs. Fezziwig and all the people who worked in the warehouse. There was a cake and great cold roast. There were dances and games too. Scrooge remembered the festivities with joy. "A small matter," said the ghost, "to make these simple folks happy." Scrooge wished he could say a kind word to his own clerk, Bob Cratchit. 13. A Broken Heart. This scene was swept away, and Scrooge saw himself again. He was older now, and he wore a greedy, restless expression. Beside him was a lovely girl whose eyes were wet with tears. "Another idol has replaced me," she said. "A golden one. It has made you a different man from the man I fell in love with. I release you, Ebenezer. May you be happy in the life you have chosen, without me." 14. The Jolly Ghost. "Spirit, take me back!" cried Scrooge. Suddenly, Scrooge found himself back in his own bedroom. He crawled into bed and sank into a heavy sleep. When the bell struck 1, he awakened. A ghostly light shone from the adjoining room. The moment Scrooge's hand was on the lock, a strange voice bade him enter. He opened the door to see the room greatly transformed. Heaped upon the floor, forming a kind of throne, were turkeys, mince pies, plum puddings, red-hot chestnuts, cherry-cheeked apples, juicy oranges, luscious pears, and steaming bowls of punch. Above it sat a jolly giant, glorious to see. "I am the ghost of Christmas present," boomed the spirit. "Touch my robe." Scrooge did as he was told, and all the delicacies vanished, as did the room and the hour of night. 15. Tiny Tim. The spirit led Scrooge to the home of his faithful clerk, Bob Cratchit. Inside, the family prepared their Christmas dinner. Mrs. Cratchit laid the table, helped by her daughter Belinda. Peter plunged a fork into a saucepan of potatoes while two smaller Cratchits danced around the table. Then in came Bob Cratchit carrying his youngest, Tiny Tim, who bore a crutch and whose legs were iron braces. "And how did little Tim behave in church?" asked Miss Cratchit. "As good as gold," said Bob Cratchit, taking Tiny Tim to the table. "He told me, coming home, that he hoped that people saw him in church, because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant for them to remember, upon Christmas Day, who made lame beggars walk and blind men see." Never was there such a goose. Stretched out with the applesauce and mashed potatoes, there was enough for everybody, and a wonderful pudding followed, decorated with a sprig of holly on top. After the feast, the family drew around the hearth. Bob Cratchit poured the Christmas punch and said, "A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us." "God bless us, everyone," exclaimed Tiny Tim, who sat beside his father. Bob held Tiny Tim's little hand in his, as if he dreaded that the child might be taken from him. "Spirit," said Scrooge, "tell me if Tiny Tim will live." "I see a vacant seat in the chimney corner and a crutch without an owner, carefully preserved," replied the ghost. "If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die." "No, no," cried Scrooge. 16. The Phantom. The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked about for the ghost of Christmas present, but instead he beheld a phantom, draped and hooded. "Are you the ghost of Christmas yet to come?" asked Scrooge. The spirit did not answer, but pointed with its hand. Scrooge recoiled in terror, for he now stood beside a bed upon which lay the body of a man. Scrooge didn't dare to lift the sheet that covered the body. 17. A vacant seat. The ghost led Scrooge through several streets familiar to him. They entered Bob Cratchit's house. The once noisy little Cratchits now sat still as statues around the fire. Then Bob Cratchit entered, and two of the children ran to him. He embraced them, saying, "I am sure none of us shall forget our poor Tiny Tim." "Never, father, never," they all promised. 18. The Vow. In a churchyard, the spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. Trembling, Scrooge crept forward and read upon the stone his own name, Ebenezer Scrooge. "Spirit," he implored, "hear me. I am not the man I was. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone." 19. A Second Chance. No sooner had Scrooge spoken when the phantom's hood and robe shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes, Scrooge's own bedpost and his own bed. Best of all, the time before him was his own, to make amends in. He ran to the window and opened it. "I don't know what day it is," he squealed, laughing and crying in the same breath. "I don't know anything. I'm like a newborn." He stuck his head out the window. "What's today?" he cried, calling down to a boy. "Why, Christmas Day," replied the boy. "It's Christmas Day," said Scrooge to himself. "I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night." "Have the butchers in the next street sold the prize turkey in the window?" asked Scrooge. "It's hanging there now," replied the boy. "Tell them to bring it here," said Scrooge. "You'll get a shilling for your trouble." 20. Christmas Day. The boy dashed off to buy the turkey. "I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's," whispered Scrooge. "He shan't know who sent it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim." Scrooge dressed in his best clothes and went out. He regarded all he met with a delighted smile. He went to church, patted children on the head, and found that everything brought him pleasure. 21. Joy. Coming toward him, Scrooge beheld the two portly gentlemen who had visited his courting house on Christmas Eve. "I would like to make a contribution to your fund for the poor," he said. Scrooge promised a hefty sum, which caused the good men to gasp. "A Merry Christmas to you," they cried. Scrooge had never dreamed that anything could give him such happiness. 22. Good things. In the afternoon he turned his steps toward his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock. "It is I, your Uncle Scrooge. Will you forgive me, Fred?" Scrooge's nephew greeted him warmly, as did all the guests, and Scrooge enjoyed Christmas as he had never done before. 23. Goodwill. Scrooge arrived early at the office the morning after Christmas. When Bob Cratchit entered, Scrooge growled at him in his old voice. "What do you mean, coming here at this time of day?" "It's only once a year, sir," pleaded Bob. "I was making rather merry yesterday." "I am not going to stand for this sort of thing any longer," said Scrooge. "And therefore I'm about to raise your salary. A Merry Christmas, Bob," said Scrooge as he clapped him on the back. "A Merry Christmas, my good fellow, that I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to help your struggling family. Now make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I." 24. A New Man. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew, or any other good old city, town, or borough in the good old world. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. And that is Dickens' A Christmas Carol. I truly do believe it's one of the classics. And it's always fun to remember. Being a bah humbug year round isn't as fun as, being a little bit more jolly and merry. I hope that you enjoy being jolly and merry the next couple of days. You have a nice night and stay cute. Sweet dreams, and I'll see you tomorrow.